The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I navigated the familiar winding road to Crystal Lake. 6 months had passed since I'd inherited Grandpa George's cabin, and this was only my 3rd visit back. Work had consumed my life. 14-hour days at Burton Marketing had left me drained, desperate for the sanctuary that only this place could provide. As the forest opened up to reveal the 2-bedroom log cabin nestled against the shoreline, I felt that familiar tug in my chest. The wraparound porch, the stone fireplace chimney rising into the pine canopy, the private dock extending into the crystal clear water. This wasn't just property, it was the repository of my most precious memories. This place has a soul. Brooke, Grandpa George used to tell me, his weathered hands gesturing toward the lake that reflected the sunset like liquid gold. Not the kind from ghost stories, but the kind that builds character, the kind that stays with you. From age 8 to 22, I'd spent 3 weeks every summer here. Grandpa taught me everything on these grounds: how to bait a hook and clean a fish, identify bird calls at dawn, paddle a canoe against the current, build a fire that would last through the night. We'd sit on the dock during sunset, our feet dangling in the cool water, eating homemade ice cream and talking about life. When anxiety crippled me in high school, it was here that he taught me meditation. When I doubted my career choices in college, it was on that very dock where he helped me map out my future. The cabin represented more than property. It represented unconditional love and hard-earned wisdom. My grandfather had been diagnosed with congestive heart failure 3 years ago. During his final year, I'd moved temporarily into his main residence in Ann Arbor to provide daily care. That's when Jason, my brother-in-law, started dropping hints about the cabin. "George loves that old place," he'd say casually. Amanda and I have always dreamed of raising kids in a spot like that, away from the city. You know, I never responded to these comments. My focus was on making Grandpa comfortable, not on inheritance talk. 2 months before he passed, Grandpa George had updated his will. He gathered the family afterward, his voice weaker, but his blue eyes still sharp. "I've made my decisions with clear mind and heart. The Ann Arbor house will be sold and proceeds divided equally. My investments will be split the same way." Then he looked directly at me. "Brooke, the cabin goes to you. You've always understood what makes that place special. I know you'll honor its spirit." Now, at 29, I desperately needed both the peace and the wisdom this place offered. As I unpacked my overnight bag, my phone buzzed. A text from Jason. "Hope you're reconsidering the family cabin situation. We could really use some time there to sort things out." I deleted it without responding. I deleted it. We'd had this conversation before. 2 hours later, as I sat on the dock with a glass of wine, my phone rang. Amanda's name flashed on the screen, and her voice was strained when I answered. "Hey sis, got a minute to talk?" "Always, and what's wrong?" A long pause. "Jason and I separated 3 weeks ago." The wine glass nearly slipped from my hands. Why didn't you tell me?" "It's complicated and embarrassing." Amanda's voice cracked. "He's been seeing someone else. A woman named Hazel from his office. She's 7 months pregnant." The timeline hit me like a physical blow. "Amanda, that means he was cheating while we were caring for Grandpa George." "Yeah." The bitterness in her voice was palpable. "The kicker is how suddenly he's all about settling down and building a family with her, after years of telling me he wasn't ready for kids." I closed my eyes, processing the betrayal. "I'm so sorry. Where are you staying?" "Mom's place." "But Brooke, there's something else you need to know. I found bills hidden in Jason's things when I was packing. Credit cards maxed out. Overdue notices. Even a foreclosure warning on some rental property I didn't even know he owned. He's drowning in debt." A chill ran down my spine. "What does that have to do with—" "He's been asking about the cabin constantly since Grandpa died, about family obligations and shared resources. He keeps saying things like, family property should benefit the whole family. I think he sees it as a solution to his problems." after Amanda told me about Jason's increasingly erratic behavior since their separation. We hung up. I stared across the lake as darkness settled, the peaceful sanctuary suddenly feeling vulnerable. Later that evening, my phone buzzed again. Jason, Brooke, need a favor. Can I use the cabin this weekend? Just for a couple days. I'm in a tight spot moving out of the house and need temporary space. I typed back, No, Jason. That won't work for me. His response came quickly. Come on, I'm in a tight spot. It's just sitting empty anyway. No, please respect that. I thought family helped family. Guess I was wrong about you. I didn't respond, but his final message that night made my stomach turn. You're being unreasonable. Amanda and I are just going through a rough patch. I need somewhere quiet to think. The next morning brought another text. This is happening whether you like it or not. Family takes care of family. I sent one final, clear message. To be absolutely clear, you do not have permission to use my cabin. Not this weekend, not any weekend. Do not go there. Do not ask again. His reply was a single thumbs-down emoji. Friday afternoon. I decided to escape to the cabin after another brutal week at work. The Nature Life campaign had been completely restructured, requiring 4 consecutive 16-hour days. I desperately needed the lake air and solitude. I stopped for groceries in the last town before the cabin's simple comfort foods, ingredients for pancakes, fresh berries, good coffee, and a bottle of wine. As I made the final turn onto the private road, I was already planning my evening a glass of wine on the dock, watching the sunset just like Grandpa and I used to do. That's when I saw it. A large moving truck sat parked in my driveway, angled awkwardly across the gravel. Its rear doors open wide like a gaping mouth. Cardboard boxes were stacked on the porch, some already spilling their contents, kitchen appliances, bedding, framed photos. A blue sedan with a baby on board sticker was parked beside the truck. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. This couldn't be happening. Not after I'd explicitly forbidden it. I parked behind the moving truck, blocking it in, and sat for a moment gathering my composure. Through the windows, I could see more details: men's clothing draped over the porch railing, a half-assembled crib leaning against the exterior wall, a dog bowl filled with water, walking around the perimeter. I peered through windows. The main living area was in disarray with boxes and unfamiliar furniture. My grandfather's antique fishing rods, which had always hung reverently on the living room wall, were propped carelessly in a corner. Through the bedroom window, I saw a woman with auburn hair struggling to hang a mobile of woodland creatures over what used to be my reading nook. The space had been transformed with pale yellow paint, woodland creature decals, and a changing table. They were setting up a nursery in my cabin, without permission. Using my key, I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. "Hello?" I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. A startled gasp came from the bedroom, followed by the appearance of a very pregnant woman. She had kind eyes and looked to be in her early 30s, one hand protectively cradling her rounded belly. "Oh," she exclaimed, "you must be Amanda. Jason said you might drop by to help. I'm Hazel." The assumption knocked me off balance. "I'm not Amanda. I'm Brooke Evans. This is my cabin." Confusion spread across Hazel's face, and I realized that Jason's manipulation went even deeper than I'd imagined. "Brooke Jason's sister-in-law." Hazel's voice wavered with uncertainty. But Jason said, "What exactly did Jason tell you about this place?" "That it's your family cabin. That you're letting us use it while we look for a house." She gestured to her belly with protective hands. "He said you were incredibly generous to offer it, especially with the baby coming in 6 weeks. We're due early August." My blood ran cold. "Hazel, I never offered the cabin to Jason. In fact, I explicitly told him he could not use it. This property belongs solely to me. I inherited it from my grandfather." Hazel's face paled. "But we're moving in. Jason said we could stay as long as needed. He's already given notice on his apartment, and I ended my lease last month when I moved in with him temporarily. He said you were happy to help us during this transition. None of that is true, I said firmly. Jason doesn't have permission to be here, let alone move in. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted us. Through the window, I watched Jason's black truck pull up beside my car. He emerged carrying takeout bags, whistling casually as if this were his home. The door opened, and Jason froze mid-step when he saw me. "Brooke," he said, recovering quickly and forcing a smile. "What a surprise! Didn't expect you until tomorrow." "I never said I was coming tomorrow. I told you not to come here at all." My voice was dangerously quiet. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" "Jason." He set the food down and spread his hands in a placating gesture. "Now let's not make a scene in front of Hazel. She's in a delicate condition. Answer the question." Jason's expression hardened. "Look, you're being unreasonable about this whole thing. You have this huge cabin that sits empty most of the time. We need a place to stay. It's a perfect solution." "A perfect solution would be respecting my property and my boundaries," I shot back. "It's family property," Jason argued, his voice rising. "Your grandfather would have wanted it to help family in need." "Don't you dare invoke my grandfather," I warned. "This cabin was left specifically to me, not to the family collectively. You have no rights here." Jason stepped closer, lowering his voice but making his height intimidating. "Be reasonable, Brooke. Hazel is 7 months pregnant. We need stability. We've already started moving in. You can't just throw a pregnant woman out." I glanced at Hazel, who looked increasingly distressed, then back at Jason. "You put her in this position, not me. You lied to her about having permission to be here." "We're not leaving," Jason said flatly. "I've already set up mail forwarding and utilities in my name. The movers are coming back tomorrow with the rest of our stuff. This is happening. Brooke, the sooner you accept it, the easier it'll be for everyone. This is illegal," I pointed out. "It's trespassing and attempted theft of property." Jason laughed coldly. "Go ahead. Call the cops on a pregnant woman. See how that plays with the family. With the locals, you'll be the villain here, not me." The manipulation was so blatant it took my breath away. He had orchestrated this entire situation, counting on social pressure and my own sense of decency to force my compliance. "I also spoke with the neighbors," Jason continued with a cold smile. "Told them all about how we're moving in to help take care of the family property while you're busy in the city. They're thrilled to have year-round residents here. Everyone thinks it's a wonderful arrangement." The calculated nature of his actions stunned me. "You're trying to establish some kind of false community consensus. I also mentioned how emotional you've been since your grandfather died, how sometimes you get confused about arrangements we've made." His smile was predatory. "If there's any trouble, they'll know who to believe." The implied threat was clear if I escalated. He would paint me as unstable, and himself as the reasonable party. "You have until morning to pack what you've brought and leave," I stated firmly. "Both of you." "Make me," Jason replied. "Better yet, call the cops. I'll show them the mail I've had forwarded here, the utilities I've switched to my name. I'll tell them about our verbal agreement that you're now trying to back out of. I'll have poor pregnant Hazel crying about how you're trying to make her homeless." In that moment, I saw Jason clearly for perhaps the first time, not as my brother-in-law, but as someone willing to bully and manipulate to get what he wanted. "This will never be your home," I said quietly. "Never." Unable to stay in the cabin with them there, I grabbed my purse and car keys. Outside, I sat in my car, hands trembling too badly to insert the key. Tears of frustration streamed down my face. How had a simple weekend getaway turned into this nightmare I called my best friend Lauren? "He's done what?" she exclaimed after I explained the situation. "That's not just boundary crossing. Brooke, that's criminal." He's thought of everything, I said. He's manipulated the situation so I look like the villain if I stand my ground. Document everything, Lauren advised. Take photos of them there without permission. Record conversations if you legally can in your state. Call a lawyer first thing tomorrow. What about tonight? I can't stay here with him, but I can't leave them alone in the cabin either. Is there a hotel nearby where you can collect yourself and make a plan? There was a small inn about 20 minutes away. Before leaving, I began taking photos of the moving truck, the boxes, the changed locks evidence. As I finished, Jason emerged from the cabin. "Running away," he taunted. "Typical. When things get tough, you've always retreated." I ignored him and began recording video on my phone, keeping it partially concealed. "For the record," I said clearly, "you do not have permission to be on this property. You do not have permission to change locks, forward mail, or establish residency here. You are trespassing, and I am formally asking you to leave." Jason's demeanor changed instantly when he realized I was creating evidence. "Turn that off," he snapped, reaching for my phone. I stepped back quickly. "Touch me or my property and it becomes assault." His face contorted with rage. "You think you're so clever. You've always been the golden child. Perfect Brooke who could do no wrong, who gets everything handed to her." The outburst revealed the depth of resentment I hadn't fully appreciated before. This wasn't just about the cabin, it was about years of perceived injustice in Jason's mind. "This isn't about me," I said calmly, still recording. "This is about your choices. You chose to lie to Hazel about having permission to be here." At that moment, Hazel appeared on the porch, having overheard our conversation. "You told me Brooke had offered us the cabin," she said to Jason, her voice quavering. "You said it was all arranged." Jason spun around. "Get back inside. Hazel, this doesn't concern you." "It absolutely concerns me," Hazel cried. "You've put our baby's future at risk with these lies. Where are we supposed to go if we can't stay here?" "We are staying here," Jason insisted. "Brooke is the one being unreasonable." "By not letting you steal my property," I interjected. Hazel descended the porch steps with difficulty, one hand supporting her back. "I can't be part of this. Jason, you promised me stability. You promised me honesty. After everything with Amanda, this isn't right. Don't you dare side with her after everything I've done for you and the baby." "What you've done is lie to me," Hazel said. Tears streaming down her face, she turned to me. "I'm so sorry. Brooke, I had no idea. I would never have agreed to this if I'd known the truth." Suddenly, Hazel gasped and clutched her belly, doubling over slightly. "Hazel!" I rushed forward, supporting her arm. "Are you okay?" "Just a sharp pain," she winced. "I've been having them on and off all day." Alarm bells rang in my head. "How far apart are these pains?" "I don't know. Maybe 20 minutes. It's probably just Braxton Hicks contractions. The doctor said those are normal." "We should get you checked out anyway," I said firmly. 7 months is too early for real labor. Jason stood frozen, seemingly paralyzed by the medical situation and the collapse of his plans. "I'll take her to the hospital," I decided, glaring at Jason. "You can stay here and start packing up your things. When we get back, I expect to see progress on that front." As I helped Hazel to my car, leaving Jason standing uselessly in the driveway, I realized we had reached the breaking point. There was no going back from here. The nearest hospital was 45 minutes away in Carson City. As I drove, Hazel called her obstetrician, who advised her to get checked as a precaution, but reassured her that stress-induced Braxton Hicks contractions were common in the 3rd trimester. "I'm so embarrassed," Hazel said after hanging up. "I had no idea Jason was lying about the cabin." "It's not your fault," I said, keeping my eyes on the winding country road. "Jason is manipulative. He lied to both of us." "He's been doing that a lot lately," Hazel said. staring out the window, telling me one thing, then I find out later it wasn't true. Like what? He told me he and Amanda were separated for 6 months before we got involved. I later found out it had been barely 2 weeks. Hazel's voice was heavy with regret. He said he'd told her about us, but she called me one day at work completely shocked. The pieces were falling into place. When did you find out you were pregnant? Around Christmas. I wanted to end things when I realized how much he'd lied, but then she placed a protective hand on her belly. I couldn't go through with an abortion. It just wasn't right for me. And Jason. Hazel laughed bitterly. Suddenly he was all in. Baby names, nursery plans, talking about marriage. It was a complete turnaround from the man who told me he wasn't sure he ever wanted kids when we first met. At the hospital, the doctor confirmed false alarm stress and dehydration, but advised Hazel to rest and avoid tension for the next few days. While we waited for discharge papers, I called the county sheriff's non-emergency line. Unfortunately, Ms. Evans, this falls into a gray area, Sheriff Sullivan explained. If he's established any kind of residency claim, even a fraudulent one, it becomes a civil matter requiring formal eviction. But he just arrived today, I protested. I have proof I denied permission. That helps, Sullivan said. In that case, we can treat it as trespassing. I can send a deputy out to accompany you back to the property and ensure he leaves peacefully. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. We should be back within a couple of hours. I'll have Deputy Rodriguez meet you there at 6 p.m., and Miss Evans document everything. Take photos, videos, keep all text messages. If this escalates to court, you'll want that evidence. During the drive back, I explained my conversation with the sheriff. Hazel agreed to go directly to the hotel I'd booked for her while I returned to the cabin with the deputy. I can't afford a hotel, Hazel said worriedly. I've been on unpaid leave from work for 3 weeks because of back pain. I've got it covered, I assured her. This isn't your mess to fix. When Deputy Rodriguez and I pulled up to the cabin at 6 p.m., the scene that greeted us was worse than I'd imagined. The front door stood wide open, and inside, furniture had been overturned and several of my grandfather's framed photos lay shattered on the floor. Looks like someone had a tantrum, Rodriguez observed, his hand moving instinctively to rest on his holstered weapon. We found Jason in the backyard, burning papers in the fire pit. When he saw the deputy, his expression flickered between defiance and fear. Jason Taylor, Rodriguez called. I'm Deputy Rodriguez with the County Sheriff's Department. We've received a complaint of trespassing on private property. Jason straightened, adopting an injured expression. There must be some misunderstanding. Officer, this is family property. I'm well within my rights to be here. I stepped forward, clutching a folder. I have the deed and my grandfather's will right here. The property belongs solely to me, Brooke Evans. Mr. Taylor has no ownership rights whatsoever. Rodriguez reviewed the documents carefully. These appear to be in order. Mr. Taylor, Miss Evans has the legal right to determine who can and cannot be on this property. We had a verbal agreement, Jason insisted, shooting me a venomous look. I have text messages proving otherwise, I countered, showing the deputy our exchange where I explicitly denied permission. Rodriguez turned to Jason. Sir, at this point you have 2 options. You can leave voluntarily with your belongings, or you can be arrested for criminal trespassing. Miss Evans has made it clear you do not have permission to be here. For a tense moment, I thought Jason might choose arrest. His face contorted with rage as he realized his carefully constructed plan was collapsing. This is ridiculous, he shouted. I have rights. I have nowhere else to go. You can't just throw me out. His desperation was finally showing through the manipulation. You put yourself in this situation, I said firmly. You lied, you manipulated, and you trespassed. The consequences are yours to face. Jason lunged toward me, but Rodriguez stepped between us immediately. "Sir, you need to calm down right now, or you'll be leaving in handcuffs." "You think you're so perfect," Jason snarled at me over the deputy's shoulder. "Little Brooke who could do no wrong, who gets everything handed to her. Well, guess what? I'm broke, I'm desperate, and you're sitting on this gold mine doing nothing with it." The truth came spilling out: his debts, his failed investments, his need for the cabin as a financial lifeline. But instead of evoking sympathy, his desperation only highlighted the calculated nature of his scheme. "That's enough, Mr. Taylor," Rodriguez said firmly. "You have 1 hour to gather your belongings and leave this property." It took 2 hours for Jason to pack his and Hazel's belongings into his truck and the moving van, with each box. His resentment seemed to grow. As he prepared to leave, he fixed me with a cold stare. "This isn't over. Brooke, the family will hear about how you treated a pregnant woman. I'll sue for my rightful share of this property. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." Rodriguez stepped between us. "That's enough, Mr. Taylor. Any harassment or threats will result in additional charges." Jason snorted derisively, but said nothing more. He climbed into his truck while Rodriguez ensured the moving van driver had alternate delivery instructions. As the vehicles disappeared down the driveway, relief washed over me like a physical wave. Rodriguez handed me his card. "Call immediately if he returns. And I strongly suggest changing your locks tonight. I can recommend a local emergency locksmith." After he left, I stood in the middle of the ransacked cabin, surveying the damage. It wasn't just the overturned furniture or broken glass that hurt. It was the violation of my sanctuary. The space that had always represented safety and peace now felt tainted. But as I began picking up the pieces of my grandfather's shattered photo frames, carefully preserving the images inside, I made a silent promise. I would reclaim this space. I would not let Jason's actions destroy what this cabin meant to me. The locksmith Rodriguez recommended arrived within the hour and replaced all external locks. That night, I slept fitfully on the couch, jumping at every sound from the woods outside, wondering if Jason would make good on his implied threats. The next morning brought a gentle knocking at the front door, disoriented and wary. I peered through the peephole to find Amanda standing on the porch, holding 2 coffee cups and a bag from the local bakery. "Reinforcements have arrived," she announced when I opened the door. "I drove up first thing when you texted about the locks being changed." The simple gesture of solidarity brought tears to my eyes. We hugged tightly before surveying the remaining disarray inside. "Jason always was a sore loser," Amanda remarked, taking in the damage. "But this is a new low, even for him." We spent the morning cleaning, restoring order to the chaos Jason had left behind. Amanda told me more about their marriage's deterioration over the past year, how Jason had become obsessed with appearances and financial status, his increasing manipulation and blame when things didn't go his way. "You deserved better," I told her firmly as we swept up broken glass. "So did Hazel," Amanda replied, surprising me. "She's young and impressionable. Jason has a way of making you believe you're special until you're not useful anymore." By afternoon, we'd restored most of the cabin to order, though emotional wounds still felt raw. I called Hazel to check on her, relieved to hear she was resting comfortably at the hotel. "I've been thinking," I told her. "I know some people at Sierra Women's Resource Center in Carson City. They have transitional housing for women in difficult situations. Would you like me to make a call?" Hazel's voice brightened. "Really? That would be amazing. I was panicking about what to do next." I made the connection, and by evening, Hazel had an intake appointment scheduled for Monday. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it would provide safety and stability while she figured out her next steps. That evening, Amanda and I sat on the dock, feet dangling in the cool water just as Grandpa George and I used to do. The sunset painted the lake in shades of orange and pink, a beautiful contrast to the day's ugliness. "Do you think Jason will really try to cause more trouble?" Amanda asked. I sighed. "Probably. He's wounded and vengeful, but I've spoken with a lawyer, and my ownership is ironclad. The best he could do is try to poison family relationships." "Mom and Dad are already on your side," Amanda assured me. "I filled them in. They're horrified by what he did." Over the next few days, we established new rhythms at the cabin. Amanda decided to stay for the week, working remotely while I did the same. We took breaks to swim in the lake, hike the surrounding trails, and reconnect as sisters. The next day brought an unexpected discovery. While cleaning the bedroom that Jason and Hazel had briefly occupied, I found a stack of overdue bills hidden in a dresser drawer, credit card statements showing maxed-out accounts. A foreclosure notice on a rental property I hadn't known Jason owned. A demand letter from a payday loan company. "He's broke," I realized, showing Amanda the papers. "That's why he was so desperate for the cabin. He's drowning in debt." Amanda examined the papers. "This explains so much. The sudden interest in family property and free housing. The pressure to let him move in." I felt a wave of clarity. He wasn't just being entitled, he was financially desperate. This revelation didn't excuse Jason's behavior, but it helped explain the intensity of his reaction. He hadn't just wanted the cabin, he had needed it as a financial lifeline. I also visited Hazel at the Women's Center, bringing her remaining belongings and helping her navigate resources for single mothers. Despite the circumstances, we developed a tentative friendship. "Jason keeps calling," she confided during one visit, alternating between apologies and accusations. "The counselor here says that's typical manipulative behavior." "Are you talking to him?" I asked. Hazel shook her head. "I'm focusing on making a stable plan for this baby. I can't have that kind of chaos in our lives." Her strength impressed me. In the midst of pregnancy, homelessness, and heartbreak, she was making difficult but healthy choices. 10 days after the confrontation, I received a certified letter from an attorney representing Jason, claiming he had established tenancy at the cabin and demanding fair compensation for his illegal eviction. My own lawyer responded with our documented evidence, the text messages denying permission, the witness statement from Deputy Rodriguez, and the property deed clearly in my name alone. We never heard from Jason's lawyer again. 3 weeks later, I discovered another blessing from Grandpa George. While reorganizing his old desk, I found a leather-bound journal I'd never seen before. Inside, dated entries chronicled his thoughts about family, property, and legacy. An entry from 2 months before his death caught my eye. "Decided to leave the cabin to Brooke alone. Some might call it favoritism, but it's about stewardship. She understands this place isn't just property, it's a sanctuary, a place that demands respect and offers wisdom in return. Others see it as an asset, but Brooke sees its soul. She'll face pressure to share ownership or usage, but I hope she stands firm. Some gifts aren't meant to be divided. Their power lies in their wholeness." A tear streamed down my face as I read his words. Even from beyond, Grandpa George had anticipated the challenges I would face and offered his encouragement to stand firm. That entry became my touchstone in the difficult months that followed. I had it framed and hung beside the fireplace, a reminder of both my grandfather's wisdom and my own hard-won boundaries. I also took practical steps to protect the property. Security cameras were installed at entry points. A proper rental agreement was drafted for any family members who might use the cabin in the future, with clear terms and time limits. The property boundaries were formally surveyed and marked. These measures weren't about paranoia. They were about establishing clear boundaries and expectations, about honoring the sanctuary that Grandpa George had entrusted to me. Slowly, the cabin reclaimed its peaceful atmosphere. The bedroom that had briefly been intended as a nursery was converted back to a reading nook, then eventually into a small office where I could work remotely, extending my stays from weekends to weeks at a time. By the 3-month mark, the emotional rawness had begun to heal. The cabin no longer felt tainted by Jason's intrusion, but rather strengthened by the boundaries I had established to protect it. One evening, as I sat on the dock watching fireflies dance over the darkening water, I realized something important. In defending my inheritance, I had also inherited my grandfather's strength, his courage to stand firm on what matters most, his wisdom to recognize when kindness requires boundaries. That revelation felt like the final piece falling into place in my healing journey. The cabin was more than ever my sanctuary now, not because it was unchanged, but because I had fought for it, reclaimed it, and made it mine in a deeper way than before. A month later, Hazel gave birth to a healthy baby boy she named Noah. I visited them in the hospital, bringing a small stuffed fish that reminded me of the ones that swam in Crystal Lake. "Aunt Brooke is here," Hazel told the tiny bundle in her arms, surprising me with the honorary title. "Aunt," I questioned softly, "you've been more family to us than Noah's actual father." Hazel explained, "Jason hasn't even called to ask if the baby was born." That moment crystallized something important. Family isn't always defined by blood or marriage. Sometimes it's formed through crisis, compassion, and the choices we make in difficult moments. 3 months after what my sister and I now called the invasion, life had found a new equilibrium. Jason's threats of legal action had fizzled when his attorney realized how solid my ownership claim was. My relationship with Amanda had grown stronger through our shared experience of setting boundaries with manipulative behavior. As for Hazel, she had found her footing at the Women's Resource Center, securing a part-time remote job that accommodated her pregnancy and later her newborn. When baby Noah arrived 6 weeks after the cabin confrontation, their presence added new joy to the old sanctuary. The cabin itself had undergone both physical and emotional restoration. Even my parents had visited their first time at the cabin since Grandpa George passed. They brought his favorite fishing pole, which Jason had damaged during his tantrum, now professionally restored. "Your grandfather would be proud," Dad said as we stood on the dock. "Not just of how you've maintained the place, but of how you defended it." Mom nodded in agreement. "It takes courage to hold boundaries, especially with family. George knew you had that strength." The family dynamics had shifted permanently. Jason remained estranged, having moved to Chicago for a fresh start according to mutual acquaintances. Amanda had filed for divorce and begun therapy to process the manipulation she'd endured throughout their marriage. 1 year later, as autumn painted the surrounding forest in fiery hues, I sat on the dock where Grandpa George and I used to have our evening talks. I'd been reading through his journal, and one passage resonated with everything I'd learned. Property isn't just land or buildings, it's a responsibility, a trust. When you own something, you become its steward, not just its possessor. The cabin isn't valuable because of its market price. It's valuable because of the wisdom it holds, the memories it keeps, the sanctuary it provides. As I close this chapter of my story, I was grateful for the difficult lessons it taught me, learning to stand firm when faced with manipulation, recognizing the difference between genuine need and entitlement, understanding that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is maintain clear boundaries. The cabin had become something more than I'd ever imagined, not just my sanctuary, but a place where broken people could learn to heal. Hazel visited monthly with Noah, their laughter filling the rooms with new memories while honoring the old ones. The annual family 4th of July gathering continued, but with clear guidelines sent in advance and respected by all who attended. Most importantly, I had internalized Grandpa George's final lesson. Boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're guidelines that teach others how to respectfully remain in your life. I'd learned to say no without guilt, to help others without enabling them, and to distinguish between family members who deserved my trust and those who would exploit it. The property had new security measures, cameras, updated locks, formal usage agreements, but these weren't born from fear. They were practical expressions of self-respect, clear communication of my values, and protection for the sanctuary that meant so much to so many. My work life had improved dramatically as well. Standing up to Jason had given me confidence to negotiate better conditions at Burton Marketing. I now worked remotely 3 weeks each month, splitting time between the city and the lake. The Nature Life account had not only stayed, but expanded after seeing my innovative approach to crisis management. As the last light faded from the autumn sky, I raised my wineglass to the lake, to the memory of my grandfather, and to the hard-won peace of knowing I could protect what mattered most. "Thanks for the lesson, Grandpa," I whispered to the evening air. "I finally understand what you meant about this place having a soul. It's not just about the memories, it's about the courage to honor them." A gentle breeze rustled through the pine trees, carrying the scent of wood smoke from my fireplace and the clean smell of lake water. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called across the water the same haunting sound that had lullabied me to sleep during those formative childhood summers. The cabin stood behind me, lights glowing warmly in the windows, ready to offer its sanctuary to those who approached it with respect, just as Grandpa George had always intended. The wraparound porch where we'd shared so many conversations, the stone fireplace where he'd taught me to build lasting fires, the dock where we'd dangled our feet and solved life's problems, all of it remained, protected and preserved for future generations who would understand its true value. Sometimes the strongest act of love is simply saying no when everything and everyone is pressuring you to say yes. I had learned that lesson the hard way, but it was a lesson that would serve me and those I chose to help for the rest of my life. In protecting my boundaries, I had discovered not just my strength, but my capacity for genuine compassion. The difference between helping someone like Hazel, who respected my generosity and worked to build her own independence, and enabling someone like Jason, who saw kindness as weakness to be exploited. As I finally headed inside, I realized that this was exactly what Grandpa George had hoped for when he left me this place. Not just the property, but the responsibility to use it wisely, to protect it fiercely, and to share its lessons with those ready to learn them. The journal entry that had guided me through the darkest moments was now framed beside the fireplace, illuminated by the warm glow of the flames. Some gifts aren't meant to be divided. Their power lies in their wholeness. The sanctuary was safe. The boundaries were clear. And I was finally, truly home. Through the window, I could see Noah's stuffed fish sitting on the mantel next to Grandpa George's restored fishing pole, symbols of continuity and change, of honoring the past while nurturing the future. This cabin would continue to be a place where character was built, where wisdom was shared, and where those who understood its soul could find the peace and strength they needed. The sacred boundaries I had fought so hard to establish weren't barriers, they were the very foundation that allowed love, respect, and genuine connection to flourish. In learning to protect what mattered most, I had discovered what family truly meant, not those who share your blood, but those who honor your heart. And in the quiet peace of the cabin that night, with the lake whispering against the shore and the fire crackling softly in the hearth, I knew that Grandpa George's greatest gift wasn't the property itself. It was the wisdom to know when to hold on and when to let go, when to give and when to withhold, when to open your heart and when to guard it fiercely. The cabin's soul lived on, stronger than ever, ready to teach its lessons to anyone wise enough to listen.